Droughts are prolonged periods of water scarcity that can have devastating impacts on people and the environment. They lead to agricultural losses, water shortages, and ecological damage, affecting ecosystems and biodiversity. Droughts increase the risk of wildfires, harm public health, and cause economic hardships. Additionally, they can trigger population displacement. Number 10. 1930s United States Dust Bowl Drought. The Dust Bowl drought of the 1930s was a severe environmental disaster that affected the Great Plains region of the United States. It was characterized by a prolonged drought, coupled with poor land management practices and agricultural techniques that led to widespread soil erosion. During this period, intense dust storms, or black blizzards, swept across the plains, picking up dry topsoil and creating massive dust clouds that darkened the sky. The combination of the drought and the erosion of topsoil created massive dust storms that devastated farmlands, leading to massive crop failures and significant economic hardships for farmers. The Dust Bowl caused widespread environmental degradation, forcing many farmers to abandon their land and migrate to other regions in search of better opportunities. The severe economic and social impacts of the Dust Bowl exacerbated the effects of the Great Depression during the same period. The federal government responded by implementing various soil conservation and land reclamation programs, such as the Soil Conservation Service, now the Natural Resources Conservation Service, to address the soil erosion and restore the health of the land. These efforts, along with changes in agricultural practices, eventually helped to alleviate some of the Dust Bowl's most devastating effects. Number 9. 1968 to 1974 Africa Sahel Drought. The Sahel Drought of 1968 to 1974 was a devastating climatic event that affected several countries in the Sahel region of Africa. The Sahel is a semi-arid zone situated between the Sahara Desert to the north and the more fertile savannas to the south. The region includes countries such as Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, Sudan, and Eritrea. The drought lasted for several years, causing a significant reduction in rainfall across the Sahel region. This led to water scarcity, dry soils, and diminished agricultural productivity. Crop failures and reduced grazing lands resulted in severe food shortages and widespread famine. Many communities faced acute malnutrition and starvation, leading to a major humanitarian crisis. The drought's extended duration and lack of vegetation cover contributed to land degradation, soil erosion, and desertification. These environmental changes exacerbated the impact on local communities' livelihoods, particularly those dependent on agriculture and pastoralism. The drought severity and duration led to one of the most significant humanitarian crises in the region's history. Millions of people were affected, and international aid efforts were required to provide food, water, and assistance. Many people were forced to leave their homes in search of better living conditions and food resources, leading to significant population displacement and migration. The drought's impact on agriculture and livestock had severe economic consequences for the affected countries, leading to increased poverty and economic instability. The Sahel Drought of 1968 to 1974 was a stark reminder of the vulnerability of arid and semi-arid regions to climate variability and the potential for devastating impacts on human populations and the environment. It prompted international efforts to improve food security, water management, and disaster preparedness in the Sahel region. Number 8. 1895 to 1903 Australian Federation Drought. The Australian Federation Drought, also known as the Federation Drought or the Great Drought, was a significant and prolonged drought that affected various parts of Australia from 1895 to 1903. It was one of the most severe and enduring drought events in the country's history. The drought persisted for nearly a decade, lasting from 1895 to 1903. It affected multiple states and regions across Australia. The drought was characterized by a prolonged period of below-average rainfall, leading to water shortages, dried-up rivers, and depleted water resources. The lack of rainfall caused extensive agricultural losses, with crops failing and livestock dying due to lack of food and water. The drought severely impacted rural communities and agricultural economies. The severity of the drought prompted many people to leave rural areas in search of better living conditions and opportunities, leading to population movements and migration. The Federation drought coincided with Australia's federation process, which culminated in the federation of 6 colonies to form the Commonwealth of Australia on January 1, 1901. The drought's impact on the economy and social conditions influenced the early years of the new nation. Number 7. 2003 to 2010 Australia, the Big Dry. The Big Dry, also known as the Millennium Drought, was a prolonged and severe drought that affected Australia from 2003 to 2010. It was one of the most significant drought events in the country's modern history, and had far-reaching impacts on various aspects of Australian. The drought lasted for nearly a decade, affecting different parts of Australia during various stages of its progression. The drought was characterized by a prolonged period of below-average rainfall, leading to water shortages, reduced river flows, and depleted water reservoirs. The drought led to severe water scarcity, particularly in major cities and regional areas. Water restrictions were imposed in many places, impacting daily life, industries, and the environment. The prolonged drought resulted in environmental challenges, such as soil erosion, decreased biodiversity, and stress on ecosystems. It also increased the risk of wildfires. The Big Dry prompted a reassessment of water management practices and investment in infrastructure projects to improve water security and resilience to future droughts. The Big Dry was a transformative event for Australia, prompting significant efforts to better manage water resources, develop drought resilience, and address the challenges posed by a changing climate. Number 6. 1994 to 1998 North Korean Drought. The North Korean drought of 1994 to 1998, also known as the Arduous March, was a severe and prolonged drought that affected North Korea, leading to one of the most devastating humanitarian crises in the country's modern history. The drought lasted for several years, from 1994 to 1998, with significant variations in intensity across different regions of North Korea. The lack of rainfall resulted in widespread crop failures and food shortages. Agricultural production significantly declined, leading to a severe food crisis. The drought, coupled with economic difficulties and poor agricultural policies, led to a major famine in North Korea. Millions of people faced acute malnutrition and starvation, resulting in a significant loss of life. The drought and subsequent famine strained the country's already fragile economy, exacerbating existing economic challenges. The food shortages and malnutrition during the drought and famine had severe health consequences, with increased rates of diseases and mortality. North Korea's government sought international assistance to address the crisis, leading to humanitarian aid and assistance from various countries and organizations. The North Korean drought of 1994 to 1998 had far-reaching consequences, including significant loss of life and suffering for the North Korean population. It also brought attention to the country's vulnerability to environmental challenges and raised concerns about its ability to cope with such crises. Number 5. 2012 to 2017 United States-California drought. The California drought of 2012 to 2017 was an extended and severe drought event that primarily affected the state of California in the United States. It was one of the most significant droughts in California's modern history and had wide-ranging impacts on various aspects of life in the region. The drought persisted for several years, from 2012 to 2017, making it one of the most prolonged droughts in California's recorded history. The drought was characterized by a significant lack of precipitation, leading to reduced water availability and diminished surface water reservoirs. The drought created favorable conditions for wildfires, which became more frequent and intense. Wildfires threatened homes, communities, and ecosystems, resulting in significant damage and the displacement of residents. The prolonged drought put stress on ecosystems and biodiversity. Rivers and streams experienced reduced flows, impacting aquatic species and habitats. Reduced water levels in reservoirs affected hydropower production, leading to an increased reliance on other energy sources. The drought prompted a reevaluation of water management practices, and California implemented various water conservation measures to cope with the crisis. The California drought of 2012 to 2017 served as a wake-up call for the state and the broader region to address water management, conservation, and climate change adaptation. Efforts were made to improve water infrastructure, promote water efficiency, and increase awareness of sustainable water use practices. Number 4. 1979 to 1981 Bangladesh drought. The Bangladesh drought of 1979 to 1981 was a significant drought event that affected the South Asian country of Bangladesh. The region's monsoon-dependent agriculture and water resources make it vulnerable to droughts, which can have severe impacts on the country's economy and people. The drought persisted for several years, from 1979 to 1981, leading to a prolonged period of water scarcity. The drought was characterized by below-average rainfall during the monsoon seasons, which are critical for agricultural activities and water supply in Bangladesh. The decline in agricultural output resulted in food shortages and increased food prices, leading to a strain on food security for vulnerable populations. The drought also affected livestock and fisheries, as water sources and grazing lands dried up, impacting the livelihoods of those dependent on these sectors. The drought created a humanitarian crisis, with communities facing water scarcity, food shortages, and health challenges due to malnutrition and waterborne diseases. The drought had ecological consequences, including stress on natural ecosystems, reduced river flows, and increased land degradation. Number 3. 2004 to 2008 Iberian Peninsula drought. The Iberian Peninsula drought of 2004 to 2008 was a prolonged and severe drought that affected the countries of Spain and Portugal in southwestern Europe. The Iberian Peninsula experiences a Mediterranean climate, making it prone to periods of dryness, but the 2004 to 2008 drought was particularly severe and had significant impacts on both countries. The drought was characterized by a significant lack of precipitation, leading to reduced water availability, depleted reservoirs, and low river flows. The reduced water supply affected both urban and rural areas, leading to water use restrictions and water shortages in some regions. The dry conditions and lack of rainfall increased the risk of wildfires, with numerous forest fires affecting both countries, damaging natural areas, and posing risks to communities. Reduced water levels in reservoirs affected hydropower production, leading to an increased reliance on other energy sources. Efforts have since been made to enhance water conservation and improve water supply systems in Spain and Portugal to better cope with future drought challenges. Number 2. 2012 to 2014 drought in India. The drought in India from 2012 to 2014 was a significant meteorological event that affected various parts of the country. India's climate is characterized by distinct monsoon seasons, and the 2012 to 2014 drought brought below-average rainfall during crucial monsoon periods, resulting in widespread water scarcity and agricultural challenges. The reduced water supply affected both rural and urban areas, with some regions experiencing acute water stress and facing water use restrictions. The lack of rainfall and water scarcity resulted in significant crop failures and reduced agricultural productivity. Farmers faced financial difficulties and struggled to meet their livelihood needs. The decline in agricultural output led to food shortages and increased food prices, affecting food security for vulnerable populations. The drought also affected livestock and animal husbandry, as water and fodder became scarce, leading to hardships for pastoral communities. The drought highlighted the need for improved water management practices and preparedness measures to cope with drought events in the future. The drought in India from 2012 to 2014 was a sobering reminder of the country's vulnerability to climate variability and the importance of sustainable water management and agricultural practices. It prompted efforts to enhance water conservation, improve irrigation systems, and strengthen disaster preparedness to better cope with future drought challenges in India. Number 1. 2011 Horn of Africa drought. The Horn of Africa drought in 2011 was a severe and devastating drought that affected several countries in the Horn of Africa region. The Horn of Africa comprises countries in the eastern part of the continent, including Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, and Eritrea. The drought was characterized by below-average rainfall during critical periods, leading to water scarcity and reduced water resources. The lack of rainfall resulted in widespread crop failures and livestock losses, leading to a severe food crisis and humanitarian emergency. The United Nations declared famine in parts of Somalia in July 2011. The drought triggered a massive humanitarian crisis, with millions of people facing acute malnutrition, starvation, and displacement. Many people were forced to leave their homes in search of food and water, leading to significant internal displacement within and across borders. In regions already experiencing political instability and conflicts, the drought exacerbated tensions and resource competition. The severity of the drought prompted an international response, with humanitarian aid and assistance from various countries and organizations. The Horn of Africa drought in 2011 was one of the worst drought-related disasters in the region's history, resulting in widespread suffering and loss of life.